Good morning. I'm going to speak about the aerospace industry in Baja California and QueréTaro in Mexico. And this is the content. I have 15 minutes, right? Okay. So, I mean, after listening to these three good presentations from my colleagues, I need to say something about the research question, and I bring what I spoke a long time ago with Christian, and I say, Christian, you are involved in so many projects in unions, and he said, no, this is a live research project instead of a single project. So it's the same for me. I'm working on the industry and firms, people, regions, but always is the same question, regional development. Why? Because it's a matter of generating employment, value add generation, capture of value add, and nowadays the democratize of value add. So I'm going to talk about these four issues. So first of all, some very global information that demand for, the dynamics of this sector is good. There is a forecast in terms of number of aircrafts that they will need to produce in the next 20 years. As you see and as you saw in one of the first presentation or the second presentation, there's an increasingly global supply chain, security factor and complex production process always require quality certification, and important when we compare with, for instance, with automobile industry, the technology product is not disruptive, rather is progressive. But having said that, let's have some quick view of the value added content in different products. If we measure, my colleague Pardi from Frank from Jerpisa, he tried to compare the kilos, the value add kilos in four different products or industries, and it's so clear that the iPhones is quite a high tech, but the aerospace is not so bad. Related with computers or tech of cars. So, having said that, of course there is a technology. The last presentation was also on 4.0. So it's not that. The trend is progressive rather than disruptive. Anyway, always there are some important technologies that are included in products, such as the revolution of materials for the aerospace, and the artificial intelligence, especially in the control of many parameters, and the sensors. The sensors, quite an issue, the production of sensors for the pico seconds. Okay, but the same for process. Automation, IoT, big data, and 3D printing are important issues that are taking place in this industry. So all of this is in the PowerPoint. So talking about Mexico, first of all, Mexico has an important dynamism in terms of the creation of plants, employment, FDI, exports, mainly to the United States, but also the national integration, which do not mean Mexican companies, but rather companies that make the supply chain inside the country. Why is Mexico so dynamic in this and in other sectors? Well, the cumulative research shows that it's simple, close to the market, cheap, not just in terms of labor, but in other, as a cost factor as well, good environment for business, and of course, disponibility, availability, and cheap skilled people. So why is that? Well, because some regions in Mexico, especially in the north part and the central part of Mexico, has a long experience in electronics and an automobile industry. So they have more than 50 years of experience people working with this process. So that's why it's not so difficult to move from the mobility from one industry to another. So that explains why are so many companies around the country, especially in those two areas. We call this the Bajío, and this is the Norte states. Here is Baja California and QueréTaro, where we are developing a research with our colleagues Blandin and Cristian as a part of this project. So, activities in the GBC. There is a public database in Mexico because government is kind of preoccupied of creating information and bringing information to the clusters and bring information in order to have a more stronger ecosystem. So there is a database on plans, but not just the typical about employment but this rather than activities. So about capabilities of the plants. So capabilities means the type of activities, the type of functions, how the quality of this, one of the metrics of this quality certifications, etc. So it's an interesting database. So we're working on that. They have some years, but this is just a photograph, and in 2015, and we compare Baja and QueréTaro, the two cluster or mega clusters, and first of all, as the graphic is more or less clear, is more complex. The situation in QueréTaro, in the interior rather than the border, and the same when you're talking about the type of activities such as product, process, material, services. I'm sorry that I'm running, but it's always a matter of time. So the same for functions and certifications. Just on function and certification, still it's really on manufacturer sides. Having saying that, always is always means in the electronics, in the automobile, in the aerospace. Always you can find engineering and design activities, not just from the public academia and public centers, but company. This is the company functions, plus the MRO, maintenance and repair operations. So it's manufactured, but there is more complex situation even in these areas. So and you can see the comparison between the two. And interesting, even though all of these companies are engaged in the supply chain of the aerospace and the global activities, some of them has not the certification yet. So these certifications are very strong, expensive, and very important in order to be part of this. So sometimes there is a intermediary company in order to protect for this lack of certification. Anyway, it's not so much, but this is a stronger situation of the QueréTaro rather than Baja California. So this is just a infographic that shows some of the companies what type of activities are producing. As I mentioned, there are many activities related with the aircraft happening in Mexico. So I will say almost all, except that we are not assembling the final aircraft, but mainly is, and that was a huge discussion in terms of if we can produce an airplane, a complete airplane or not, but generally the capabilities are there. So this is the same for the Baja California, the electronics, the components, and the turbo technologies. So with this database, we can make this conclusion that most of the plants are located in the Tier 3, Tier 4 in Baja California. more or less the same, but with less percentage in the case of QueréTaro. So it's something that we expected, but as I mentioned, between 20 to 30% of companies are doing more value-add activities. So just briefly cluster comparison, there is in Baja California 2 clusters in 2 cities, in QueréTaro is 1. The type of cluster is different. It's a top-down, and the other is created by the lead firms. There is a different complexity in terms of the generations of the capabilities of the firms in these 2 sites. One in QueréTaro has more power for download research funds. There is more FDI than in the other, even though there is more companies and more employment. So one is focused on employment and many activities, but the other is more strategic, QueréTaro. And different XXX model, different origin of country of origin leading firms, French and Canadian, sorry for the Bombardier, I don't put the Canadian, and the labor force, interesting. The structure of the labor force is also quite different. It's more heavily in technicians in the QueréTaro, active unions, and non-unions in Baja California, and the wages are also higher than the average, but more higher in the case of QueréTaro, maybe because this more complexity of production and the ecosystem. So in order to finalize, there are some challenges for this industry. There are many challenges for the regions and for the people and the institutions and everything. So one strong is the logistics, related with logistics, because it's a transborder issue, protectionist matters from the Trump initiatives. So all of this has a shake for the global value. Second is this industry by means depends on the skilled labor. So always is needed more talent, always, and nowadays more. But the problem is, and this is interesting, Baja and in QueréTaro, which is more stronger cluster, etc., half of the people is outsourcing. Half of the people. So it's like Huawei. Huawei, the big company in Mexico, is telecom innovation, but half is outsourcing. So automation is another issue that is coming because the trends. So training needs to be not just in the typical specialized requirements, but also in the automated and digital new world. Certification, of course, is important to be implemented, and cybersecurity nowadays is also more, not just in terms of the control of the aircraft, but in control of the process and the traceability of all of these information flows in the production process. So the most updated information yesterday night. So the new head of the national, national research system in Mexico, and said that we're no longer found big firms in Mexico, because a lot of R&D money, public money, goes to the big firms. So they say, not anymore. So why? Because we need to we need to make more capabilities for locals. So but at the same time, companies need this information. Always is needed in the ecosystem. So this is a new challenge. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.